Hi, I'm Renée Walker, a mindset mentor, speaker, and lover of all things spiritual. I believe that at our core, we are all spiritually wired for love, peace, success, and abundance. Here on the podcast, we're diving into mindset, wellness, and business, but always through a spiritual lens. Let's just say we're going deep, but we're keeping it light. So let's elevate your life from the inside out, one conversation at a time. Welcome to Spiritually Wired. Welcome back to Spiritually Wired. I was listening to a podcast recently and I heard someone or the interviewee speak of spirituality from a place of oracle cards and crystals and energy work. And it's so interesting because I had this reaction in my body. I was completely triggered. And the interesting thing is that the person that was saying this is fully spiritual, is a coach that I admire, that believes in the importance of being or incorporating spirituality when you are manifesting big goals. So it wasn't at all what this person was saying. It was just that initial reaction that I had. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you know that I am a big believer that resistance is always here to teach us something. So when we have those big reactions, we tend to assume that it's because the other person said something wrong, or, we tend to blame whatever external circumstance it is that triggered that reaction. But part of really being intentional with how we live, part of reprogram our subconscious mind is looking at those reactions and really being willing to take a deep look and see, okay, where is this coming from? So that's exactly what I did after listening to the podcast, which was a great episode. I just thought, why did I have that reaction? Where did that come from? And, the thing is that for me, so much of my journey, and I say my journey, I know just from having worked now with so many women that I'm not alone in this, but part of the journey has been in moving through sort of the fear of being judged when it comes to some of the beliefs that I have, and when it comes to just really owning my spirituality. And my first podcast episode was titled Coming Out of the Spiritual Closet, where I shared sort of the how for so many years I felt like I was living these two lives. The part of me that was so curious about spirituality and consciousness and just really wanting to expand and to learn and to go into the metaphysical. And then the part of me that felt that was, showing up in everyday life and being the mom and wife and friend and daughter and all of that. For a number of years, I felt like there was a bit of a disconnect between those two because I was afraid of being judged for some of the beliefs that I had. So it took me a long time to really own that and to be comfortable in sharing who I am, trusting that, I will be received or I will be accepted exactly for who I am. And for those people who are not accepting me, then they're not meant for me. So it took me a while to get there. So that's where I know that there was a lot of energy around it. So it was really, interesting to sort of witness how I felt about that. And it does come down to the fact that with how far I've come, spirituality is really not a joke for me. Spirituality means everything, right? It's where everything sort of starts from my perspective. And it really is this belief in a higher energy, a universal consciousness, intelligence that is omnipresent. The idea of spirituality, when I use the word spirituality, for me it's been a lifelong sort of journey of learning, uncovering, and that continues, because part of even just the word itself is recognizing and knowing that we never fully understand it. We can't intellectualize it. We can only feel it and experience it and remain open to possibilities. So because it's such a big part of my life, I guess the first time that when I heard it described as a spiritual person, or a highly spiritual person, being someone who is into oracle cards and crystals and all of that, energy healing, which I am. I mean, I love all those things, but it just felt, we're lacking the depth of what spirituality truly is, because I know some deeply spiritual people who are not into crystals, are not into oracle cards, and are not into any of those practices. So the practice, or the philosophy behind being a spiritual person, extends way beyond any of the practices that we do. Spiritual practices can look like different things for different people. And that's where it's sort of important to always stay open. But the idea of spirituality to me has so much depth, right, when it comes down to it. And I guess, one of the parts of me that was triggered was that there's this term that we use often, and it's called woo-woo, right? Oh, that's so woo-woo. And I'm sure you've heard it, woo. And the idea with, like, when we say something is woo-woo, it does have a dismissive quality to it, even when we sort of just use it casually. And I think, it's so important to be able to keep things light and to laugh and have fun. And I say it in the intro of this podcast that I'm all about going deep, but keeping it light. And I remember when I first launched my podcast, I had Christina Bartold as a guest, and she called herself woo adjacent, and it made us all laugh so hard. And so I think that there are times and places for using those words, but I guess what I'm getting to here is that it can also be dismissive. And when your lifetime when you have a lifetime commitment to deepening your spiritual practice, maybe I'm not for dismissing it anymore, right? So that was sort of that reaction that I had. And part of my spiritual journey has been really learning from teachers that have that depth, right? One of the misconceptions that we have, again, is sort of just connecting spirituality with, sort of, it's a new age fad, or dismissing it. And many of the spiritual concepts are rooted in ancient teachings. I did my meditation teacher certification through the Chopra organization, which is all based on Vedic philosophy. And that was why I was attracted and really drawn towards that particular program, because it is based on wisdom that dates back thousands of years. There is deep insight in this program around karma, dharma, consciousness, the nature of reality. It really invites us to explore it in such a deep and profound way. If you think of, Buddhism, well, Buddhist teachings, which, is all around the path to enlightenment, mindfulness, non-attachment, inner peace, dates back thousands of years. It is ancient wisdom, yet is also spirituality. Jesus, we can see Jesus from a religious perspective, but if you take the teachings of Jesus separately, it's all about consciousness, about, really sort of love and loving one another, compassion, forgiveness, surrender, faith. So the idea of spirituality is so much more than some of the practices that have been coming about lately. And I do think that there's merit to all of it. I just think that it's important to also always be connected to the depth of what spirituality means. You know, there is often as well sort of this tug between spirituality and science. And there is the science of quantum physics, right, which is based on the idea that the foundation, everything in the universe is energy and is vibrating in different frequencies. So the reality is like the reality that we are experiencing is also sort of like this perceived reality. It all aligns with manifestation, with intention setting, with the power of our thoughts. You know, when it comes to energy work, Reiki, breath work, meditation, it's all influencing our energy field. So when we start to study and look at the link between science and spirituality, it is there. There's a great book. David Hamilton is the author. It's called Why Woo Woo Works. And it's really fascinating. He's got a PhD. And in this book, he explores the research behind why meditation works, visualization, Reiki. I'm trying to think of the other things that he explores, but it's a really sort of neat book where he ties in some of the science and the spirituality. So, you know, I think what happens often is that we get caught up in looking for proof, and in looking for the proof, we dismiss everything else. And so there is no doubt that when it comes to spirituality, we are asked to believe in the unseen and what we can't see and what we can't explain. It really is an exercise in trusting, having faith in this sort of invisible higher power that is always at play. Now, I speak of my deep belief in spirituality, and it is something that I feel very passionate about, and it is something that feels to me like everything started to make sense for me when I was able to connect to my own meaning of spirituality. And this is what it comes down to, is really leaning in to what feels like truth to you instead of dismissing things right away. And that is part of our programming, right? And part of maybe what we've been, perhaps like you've grown up in an environment where anything that wasn't scientifically proof was just sort of, you know, poo-pooed. So now later on you're holding on to that, but maybe it no longer aligns with the person that you are today. So it really invites you to take that look within and to see what holds true to me today. And that being said, the most important thing is discernment. So it's not because, so I know for me personally, it's not because I am someone who values spirituality above everything else. One thing that I've learned is how important it is to be discerning when we are in the spiritual world, right? There's toxic positivity, which is the idea that, you know, where you have this idea that we should only focus on the positive and ignore sort of what really is happening. You know, spiritual bypassing, where we can use spirituality as an excuse to avoid any real work, to avoid any accountability. Like, you know, and this is something that I sort of will joke of, but you know, everything happens for a reason. It was meant to be. I truly believe that, but I believe that from a place of when you've been willing to look at the whole picture, not using it as an excuse for everything sort of like, oh, well, it wasn't meant to be. No, there are times when you are asked to show up. You know, if every time you experience fear, you see that as a way of like, oh, well, I don't think it was meant to be because I was feeling a lot of fear in that moment, when in reality, the resistance, the fear is there to actually give you that opportunity to move through it, to heal from some limiting beliefs. So, you know, toxic positivity, spiritual bypassing, they're a real thing. You know, the other thing that's really happened is that we've been commercializing spirituality in a big way now, right? It's an industry. And so there's a lot of people out there that are promoting themselves maybe as spiritual influencers or spiritual coaches, but they've not necessarily done the work, and so it has a more surface level energy. And listen, I do believe that sometimes it's like we need certain teachers to even open the door for us, and they are meant to open the door for us. And then it's like, as you open that door, as you start to examine, as you start to learn, to be curious, you may be guided to go to explore further, and that's where maybe other teachers will come. So, you know, again, not to take away from, every teacher has their own place. However, it is important to practice discernment. You know, there's this guru culture, and this is where I truly believe, for me, it's like my sign is anyone who says that they have all the answers. That is my red flag. That is when I'm like, no, I don't believe that anyone has the answer, all of the answers, because every answer is unique to each person. So a true guru, a true teacher, invites you to look within and to figure out those answers for yourself. It's not about being told what to do. And I think that in a world where there's so much quick fix these days, and so we want the person, we want the coach to tell us, you know, this is the path for you, this is exactly what you need to do, we can lose trust with the fact that we have our own inner compass, we have our own inner wisdom. We can't bypass the work that needs to be done, which is to reconnect with yourself, to spend that time in stillness. You can't bypass the meditations, because the meditations or the time in quiet in nature are there to show you what you need. No one else knows it. And, you know, that's sort of like the hard truth around any type of spiritual work. So really trusting your own inner wisdom, knowing that you are your own guru, right? So trust your intuition, trust your inner wisdom, without sort of just blindly following other people because it seems like the thing to do. So really an invitation to question, to be curious always. You know, spirituality should be grounded. And that comes with time, and it's always evolving. It's never, you know, spiritual. My spiritual connection today is different from what it was a month ago, and I know it's going to continue to evolve. And it's not that it's always deeper and better. Can I just make that clear? Because I do find that our spiritual connection involves, just like everything else, there's those ups and downs. There are times when I feel very connected, and there are times when I don't feel as connected. And I've tried to sort of push through and force it. And if I've learned anything, is that we can't force that connection. It really is an allowing, and just making sure that I'm creating enough space in order to be connected. Whenever I feel disconnected is usually when I'm busy, and I'm just busy in the doing. I've lost a balance between my being and my doing. The doing is important, the being is important. Both of them are. There are times in our lives where we're maybe being more than we're doing. There are times in our lives when we're maybe doing more than being. However, underlying that is this present sort of, there's this ever-present connection, right? Our spiritual connection. So that will evolve. There are times when I feel like the connection feels like I'm more aware of it. It's not that the connection has left me. It's just that I'm more open to it. I'm more aware of it being present. So it's not that we have to force or bring it back to us, because it's always there. We have the hand on the dial, right? And I'll say that in meditations that I will guide and lead in my classes. It's like, okay, you're turning up the volume on your intuition, on your higher self, turning up the volume on your spiritual connection. But ultimately, we can control that. It's always present. We get to choose how connected we are. And sometimes it doesn't feel like we're choosing. Sometimes it's just life is happening to us. And so we feel maybe a bit less connected because we are, again, just more living life from that doing place. So there you go. I really felt called, guided, whatever word you want to use, to hop on and record this episode. It was more of a free flow episode, but I hope that you are receiving something, and that is just ultimately to not dismiss your spiritual practice, to embrace the depth of what spirituality is and what it means to you, knowing that you get to define what spirituality is to you. And one of the questions that I ask all of my guests now in this podcast is, what does spirituality mean to you? Because I'm just always fascinated, and it's so beautiful to hear the descriptions and the way in which people see it. There's not one right or wrong way to see it. It's what is true to you in this moment. And I actually want to do a collection of all of these all the ways in which people are describing spirituality, because that is the power, right? When we can be open to how other people are seeing things, and maybe opening up something new for you. So I, with this, will remind you that you are spiritually wired for love, for success, for abundance, for spiritual connection, for depth of connection. It is always such an honor to be in this space with you. And if you want to go deeper, the Spiritually Wired membership is a space where we come together. We come together to explore these topics and to really connect in that deeper way. So you can check out the link in the bio if that's something that speaks and resonates to you. Have a great day, and I will see you next week. Thank you for listening to Spiritually Wired. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and leave a review. It really makes a big difference for the podcast. And if you're ready to dive deeper and join a soul-led community, come be a part of the Spiritually Wired membership. With weekly live lessons and a rich library of recorded classes, it's designed to support you every step of the way on your spiritual journey. We currently have a special offer where you can receive your first month for half the price. You can find a link in the show notes or come check it out at reneewalkerwellness.com. Until next time, remember to take some deep breaths. Remember that you are spiritually wired.